All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on such a lovely day outside today. So I just wanted to introduce ourselves. Most of you probably already know us. I'm Elizabeth, and Zia is here with me as well. We're lawyers, immigration lawyers in Toronto at the law firm of Long Mango G. And the reason why we're here today, and the reason why you guys are all here today, is because there have been a lot of precarious situations happening in immigration law these days, with the whole backlogs, especially in express entry, causing a lot of your work permits to expire before you can actually get PR. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the announcements that were made on Friday and some strategies on how to deal with all of these situations today. All right, let's get started.
Perfect. So what was announced? What was the big news that came out on Friday from IRCC? Well, first of all, post-grad work permits that are going to be expiring this year, so anytime between January to December of 2022, they will be eligible for an extension for another open work permit for a period of up to 18 months. So huge news in that we're going to be seeing the ability to continue on an open work permit for another additional 18 months. Regardless, we're expecting full details in the coming weeks for this program. Also, with regards to express entry, so like most of you probably know, we have not seen draws for the federal skilled worker, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail, but we haven't seen draws for federal skilled worker since December of 2020. We haven't seen Canadian experience class since September of last year. All that IRCC has been doing is the provincial nominee draws. And so a big question was, when are we going to see these express entry draws resume again? And so we are now expecting, IRCC has said that these express entry draws will resume again in early July. So a couple more months, but we're getting there soon. And then lastly, the third part of their announcement was with regards to the temporary residence to permanent residence program. So this was the program that opened last May. And one of the, so there was a couple different parts to this announcement. The first is that if you've already applied for this program and can't apply anymore, unfortunately the program is closed, but if you did apply last year for the temporary residence to permanent residence program, you do not need to remain in Canada while you're waiting for that application to be decided. So IRCC is basically saying that, look, we get it, we're taking longer than we had initially expected for processing these permanent residence applications. And so, you don't have to be in Canada while you're waiting for this, your permanent residence application to be decided. The second part is that last year we did see open bridging work permits announced, particularly for candidates who had, again, applied for the TR to PR program. IRCC is now extending that, so they will now be issued until the end of 2024. The reason or the idea behind it is that all TR to PR applications should be processed by the end of 2024, and so this should mean that when you do one more extension to get you a work permit till 2024, you won't need another one, and that's what they're hoping for. That's what we're all hoping for, that they come back soon. And then lastly, if you included your dependent family members as part of your TR to PR application, they'll also be eligible for open work permits, so they can come join you in Canada while you're waiting for that PR application. So again, all of this was announced last Friday. IRCC did announce this on the 22nd, and we're expecting to see the instructions, so further details on the postgrad work permit extensions coming out in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned.
All right. Oh, by the way, guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box, and Zia and I will do our best to go through your questions at the end of the presentation, okay? Right, so, what do all of these changes mean? Let's talk first about work permits. one of the unfortunate things about the express entry not doing these draws is that a lot of people who normally would have expected to be able to apply for permanent residence and at least get a bridging work permit, you're no longer able to do so. So what do we do about that? Okay, so here's some scenarios and we can, kind of flesh these out a little bit. Okay, so what happens if your work permit has already expired? Okay, we really do want to play sometimes with the rules on how to make sure that you can get your new work permits and you don't go out of status. So if you're already on implied status, that means you've already applied to extend your work permit before your previous work permit had expired, then try to hold on, and hopefully by the time an officer gets to your application, the new policy will be in place. You may want to go and supplement your application. You can go in the web form and submit new information about that and do it that way. Now, if your work permit had already expired and you didn't apply to extend it before it expired, but you're within the 90-day restoration period. So 90 days after you received your work permit expired, or if you had previously had implied status and then they denied your application, from the date of the denial of your application, you have 90 days to file a restoration application. You pay $200 for the restoration, and you can submit your work permit as well. So you try not to go beyond the 90 days because that becomes problematic. Try to apply for restoration. Even if the new policy hasn't come out yet, apply, and so that you're at least within the restoration period. If you're beyond the restoration period, you got to contact us to discuss your options. There are some things you can try, but depending on your situation, it becomes quite problematic. What I think we're hoping is that because the minister has stated that people whose work permits are expiring anytime this year from January to December of this year, that they might extend the restoration period, but who knows, right? So do come and talk with us if that's your situation. Zia, do you have any thoughts about this? What do you think?
Yeah, and I think, we are definitely waiting to hear what IRCC comes back with when they actually release the details. And I think one of the biggest questions that's been coming up is whether or not they'll extend who qualifies for it, right? Because when we saw this program come in last year, it was valid until I think early December, end of November. And so, there's a period that people who have postgrad work permits don't necessarily qualify for the old one and may not be part of this new one. So I think there's a lot of questions still that we're waiting to hear back from IRCC on. So hopefully those instructions do come out soon. Elizabeth, I think it might be helpful if we can go through some scenarios, just go through some different examples here. So if I'm on a postgrad work permit, it's expiring, let's say at the end of July. Okay. Yeah. What do I do? Should I be applying for it now? Should I wait?
Okay. Well, that goes to my next point. Maybe we'll talk about that and then we can talk about it. So the policies are set to come in July, maybe sometime in the summer, I think they said, right? So who knows, right? But what if your work permit is going to expire in May? I mean, what would you do, right? So I think my stance is don't go out of status if you can. If you go out of status, you can't work until a decision is made. Right now, these work permits are taking 3 months, 4 months. It could stretch on even longer. And it's important for you to maintain your status. So what I would do, I don't know if you agree, Zia, is to, even if you don't qualify because there's policy is not in place yet, file file your work permit extension, right? Just
Yeah.
before it expires too. The IRCC website says 30 days. That is not the law. You don't have to file it 30 days, okay? You can file it even just before it expires. You still get your implied status, you still get maintained status. You get to continue to work on the original conditions until your decision is decided. But, okay, do not leave the country while you are on implied status. As soon as you leave the country, then implied status is over, okay? Very, very important. You know, when the new policy comes through, I don't know what the IRCC recommendation might be, but you can always, you know, update your application if there's no decision that has been made yet. You can go through the web form. The web forms are sometimes slow, but at least you can try to update your application as well. Okay. What if you don't qualify for any of these policies, right? So what if you don't have a postgrad work permit, or you didn't submit your TR2PR? What if you're one of those unfortunate people? I can't believe they left people out whose work permits expired between November and December of last year. That's just a cruel joke, honestly. I hope that they take into consideration when the actual policies come out. Look, you got to talk to a professional. If you came to us, you know, we can look at other categories of work permits that you might qualify for. You might want to try to apply for permanent residence if you can, because you can get bridging work permits based on that. No matter what, I would apply before your status expires. Try to keep yourself in status, and maybe, you know, try to get a study permit. Maybe your spouse can get a study permit so that you can extend your work permit. There's different, just depends on your situation. Any other thoughts, Sia? What do you think?
Yeah, Elizabeth, do you want to maybe expand on what implied or maintained status is? What does that mean?
Sure. So basically, if you apply to extend your work permit, not as a visitor, but to extend your work permit as a worker before your work permit expires, then you can continue to work until a decision is made on your work permit. So for example, right now, it takes maybe 3 months or 4 months for a decision to be made. That means you buy yourself 3 to 4 months of time, right? So if you apply to extend your work permit just before, let's say my work permit expires April 30th, okay? I can file the application April 29th. And maybe it takes until August until an officer gets to my application. I can continue to work based on the conditions of the original work permit until a decision is made in August. Hopefully by that time in August, the policy will be in place, and an officer would see that I wanted to apply to extend my postgrad work permit, and they might issue it, you know? So that's one of the strategies you might want to take.
Okay, so if I have a work permit that's expired, I have a postgrad work permit, it's expiring May 1st.
Yeah.
Am I too late to apply? Can I apply right now?
Nope, it's not May 1st yet. It's not May 1st. You can even apply on May 1st. I don't like to do anything last minute, but you certainly don't have to apply a month before.
Perfect. And so if my postgrad work permit is expiring May 1st, so I now know that I can still apply, but can I use this program?
Yeah, so, you know, I would say I'm applying to extend my postgrad work permit, right? Now, even though this policy isn't in place yet, and if an officer looked at your application today, they would be justified in denying your application. The officer isn't going to look at your application today. Likely, they'll look at your application in August, September. And at that time, maybe the policy will be in place. And so the officer may then say, yeah, I'm going to issue it under that period of under the new policy, and you'll get your work permit. If not, and they deny your application, okay, so be it. You have 90 days to restore your status, and you can file a restoration at that point when the policy is in place and to restore your status. Now, if you're applying to restore your status, you wouldn't be able to work while waiting for your work permit to be decided. But, so that's the worst case scenario.
And do we have a date? Do we know exactly when this new bridging or this new post-grad work permit extension is going to come in?
Not really. I don't think anybody really does. I think they probably, even internally, probably have goals, but who knows? Government goals are government goals, right? But I would suspect that probably they're targeting, I think, the summer. Yeah. Okay.
But stay tuned. Keep watching our newsletters.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of you would have known about this through the newsletter. If you're not signed on yet, go to our website, lmlawgroup.com, and just scroll down and you can sign on to the newsletter. What we tell you today is what we know today. But as you know, immigration laws change all the time. And the only way we're able to update you guys is through the newsletter. So yeah, so it's there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so that's the gist of the, yeah. Okay, Zia.
Yeah, so switching over to permanent residents, many of you have likely already heard about express entry, but what I want to do is start by going through how the system, how the programs work, who qualifies, and then what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the impacts that COVID has had on this system, on these programs. So first, it's important to understand that express entry, it's not a program in itself. It's the management system for the 3 federal programs, to include the Federal Skilled Worker, Canadian Experience Class, and Federal Skilled Trades. And we'll talk about these programs in a couple minutes. But when you qualify under one of these programs, the first step in applying for your permanent residence through these is creating a profile in the express entry system. Okay, so once you've created a profile, you've qualified under one of the 3 programs, you get put into the express entry pool. Here in the pool, you're given a score out of 1,200 based on your background. And so they look at factors that fall under the comprehensive ranking system, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And so part of that is looking at your background, part of that is looking at whether you have a provincial nomination. Now, once you're in this pool, IRCC takes everyone in the express entry pool and ranks them against each other based on your CRS score. So based on your score out of 1,200. From there, IRCC goes into the pool and does draws. So they'll go in and say, okay, today we're going to pick 4,000 people, for example. They'll go from the highest scoring person, go down to the 4,000, set a minimum score, and everybody above that minimum score gets what's called an invitation to apply. Okay. It's only once you have an invitation to apply that you're actually able to prepare and submit your permanent residence application. So what's important to understand here is that when you initially create a profile, so when you initially go into the express entry pool, that is not an application for permanent residence. Basically, what you're doing at that point is telling IRCC that you're interested in becoming a permanent resident, but that's not actually an application for permanent residence just yet. So essentially what this means is that the difficult part is not qualifying or getting into the pool. The important part is making sure that you have sufficient points to be issued an invitation to in IT, an invitation to apply, which then allows you to actually prepare and submit your permanent residence application. So really important to understand the system and understand the nuances of the system. So let's take a look at how you enter the pool. Like I said, there's 3 programs. The first program is the Federal Skilled Worker program. Here, for the work experience, you need to have at least 1 year of full-time, high-skilled work experience that is continuous and in a single occupation, and that's completed within the past 10 years. Okay, lots to keep in mind, right? So it has to be continuous, very important that there's no break in your employment. We're only looking at a single occupation. So if you start with an employer and they promote you, you now fall into a different NOC code. That's now 2 different occupations, which would restart your time. So very important to keep all the different aspects of this work experience definition in mind. Now, The work experience for the federal skilled worker program does not have to be in Canada. It can be outside of Canada. And very importantly, it can also be while you're studying here in Canada or while you're self-employed. Basically, it's very inclusive in terms of what can count as work experience under the federal skilled worker program. Now, in addition to the work experience, you also need to meet minimum language proficiencies, education. You need to be able to show financial savings based on the size of your family. And then there's also adaptability factors. So you have to meet a minimum score of 67 points in order to qualify. So these are the main factors under the federal skilled worker. The second category is the Canadian experience class. Here, the work experience that you need to meet in this program is very different than the federal skilled worker. With CC, you need at least 1 year of high skilled work experience within the past 3 years. And that work experience has to be completed in Canada while you're not a student and while you're not self-employed. Okay. Now, what we don't see here as part of the requirements, if we're comparing it to the skilled worker program, is that it doesn't have to be continuous and it doesn't have to be in the single occupation. Okay. So you can combine multiple different positions that you've worked in, as long as they're all high skilled. You can combine them together. If there's breaks in your employment, that won't restart the clock in terms of a year. So really a lot more flexibility as long as that work experience is in Canada while you're not a student and you have to be an employee, you can't be self-employed. The other requirement for Canadian experience class is language proficiency. So again, looking at either your English or your French. Now, very importantly, when we're talking about the work experience in either the Canadian experience class or the federal skilled worker, you hear that we've said 1 year. Okay, 1 year of full-time work experience. Now, when IRCC looks at 1 year, there's two parts to that definition. You need at least a calendar year, and you need a total of 1,560 hours. So that's the equivalent of 30 hours a week, which is what IRCC considers to be full-time. The last program is the Federal Skilled Trades Program. Here you need at least 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years, and the work experience needs to be within a listed skilled trade. Okay, so there are specific trade occupations that qualify for this program. Language proficiency is also part of this, but additionally, you need to fall under the definition of arranged employment. So you need either a labor market impact assessment from a Canadian employer, or you need to have a certificate of qualification in the skilled trade from an approved Canadian body. Now, pre-COVID, it didn't matter which program you qualified under. All that IRCC really looked at is what your score was in the pool. So looking at your CRS points. When they did a draw, they would basically just announce the minimum score that they drew for that round. And really, if your score was higher than that, you'd get your invitation and you'd be able to apply. Since COVID, because of the early travel restrictions that came into place, IRCC started focusing on individuals that were theoretically in Canada. And so they started doing program-specific draws. What this has meant, and like I alluded to earlier, what this has meant is that we haven't seen a single draw for the Federal Skilled Worker Program since December of 2020. Okay, so because theoretically people that are under the Federal Skilled Worker Program may not be in Canada, IRCC stopped doing draws for that stream. And so the last draw was over a year ago in December of 2020. Then near the end of last year and the end of 2021, IRCC realized, oh wait, we have a huge inventory of applications to process due to the previous CC draws, due to the TR to PR programs. And so they also stopped doing draws for CC in September. So since October of last year, we have only seen draws for individuals with a provincial nomination. But like I mentioned earlier, last Friday, we got the long-awaited announcement that express entry draws, so the general or less program-specific draws would start in early July. Now, given this delay, it's likely that the minimum points required once these draws do restart in early July are going to be very high. We're expecting, and from previous memos that IRCC had come out from IRCC, it may be in the 500s, right? So much higher than what we were used to seeing, especially over the last year when IRCC was doing CC draws only, and it had come down significantly. But so when they do restart in early July, we are expecting that the points are going to go up, and the minimum scores, especially in the beginning, are going to be around the 500s. So with that, let's take a look at the CRS points and how you get scores and what IRCC considers. The first thing is age. Okay, now the maximum score, or I guess the individuals that are going to receive the maximum score for age is if you're between 20 and 29. Unfortunately, once you hit 30, as Elizabeth likes to say, it's no longer a happy birthday because you end up losing points each year. So from the time you turn 30 each year, on your birthday, you're losing more and more points. In your 40s, it's a very steep decline in terms of how many points you hit or how many points you lose each year. Once you reach 45, though, you get 0 points for your age. So you're not losing any more points anymore. But of course, if you can apply earlier, you do want to try and benefit from as many points as possible. Now, if you compare someone in their who's 45 versus someone who's getting the maximum points, which is 110 for someone who's in their 20s, that's a huge difference. So age definitely has a huge impact in terms of points. Second one is education. Very simply, the points here for education increase based on the level and the amount of education that you've completed. Third thing that IRCC looks at is language proficiency. Now, we previously spoke about needing to meet minimum language proficiency levels in order to be eligible under the 3 programs. Well, that's not the end of it, okay? And many people that we speak with are kind of shocked by this, but the CRS system looks at your language scores on your language test in each category of that language test, okay? And of course, the higher your language score is, in each category, the more points you're receiving. So ideally, you want to be scoring at least a Canadian level benchmark of 9 in every area on your language test. And so if we compare that to the IELTS, that's a 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and an 8 in listening. And on your CELPIP test, those are 9s in each category. The next one is Canadian work experience. Here, the definition is the same as what we talked about for work experience under Canadian experience class. The only difference is that IRCC looks back 10 years for work experience rather than the 3 years that we talked about for CC, for qualifying under the CC program. Now, it's not just Canadian work experience. We also consider foreign work experience. So any high skilled work experience that you've completed outside of Canada, again, within the past 10 years. It doesn't have to be all in the same occupation, but it is another important part of your CRS score. IRCC also looks at spouse, at your spouse. So if you have an accompanying spouse listed on your application, we can look at their spouse's education, language proficiency, and also any Canadian work experience. We don't look at spouses' work experience outside of Canada. We only look at the work experience in Canada. Another important one is the provincial nominations. We will talk about this in a moment, but really we're focusing on nominations here that qualify for express entry. And we'll get into the programs in a moment, but with a nomination, you qualify for an additional 600 points. And like I said earlier, what we've been seeing since October of last year is that IRCC has been focusing only on draws for individuals with a provincial nomination. And so really this has been since October of last year, the only way to really get invited. If you've studied in Canada, that'll give you additional points based on the level and the amount of education you've completed here. Arranged employment is another way to get points in the CRS. Now, when we're referring to arranged employment, it's not just having a job offer. So it's not just saying, okay, I have a contract with an employer, I want my additional points under the arranged employment. There's more to it than that. So when we're talking about arranged employment, either you need to have a labor market impact assessment, so your employer's completed an LMIA for you, or you're on an employer specific work permit. You've worked for that employer for a year already, and you continue to hold a job offer for at least 2 years from the time of your application. So for a lot of you who are here on a postgrad work permit, because that is an open work permit and not an employer specific work permit, you may not qualify for the points for arranged employment. Siblings who are in Canada and are either Canadian citizens or permanent residents will also qualify you for additional points. Another one is if you're bilingual. So if you are fluent in French, English, even just fluency in French, very important because there are a lot of additional points for individuals who have that French test. And then lastly, if you have a trade certification, that also does give you points in the CRS system.
Wow, that was a lot. Thank you so much, Tia. All right, guys. Here are the, this is just from the IRCC website. I just took these numbers last night. You know, people were trying to predict what are the draws going to be like. What is the CRS number going to be, right? So what you have to consider is, it's like, I had a client just tell me, give me a great analogy. It's like skimming the cream off of a milk. You take the top layer of whatever, okay? You're skimming the top, okay? So the IRCC, normally every draw in the past, they've, for example, invited 3,000, 4,000 people. So if they're doing the first draw and they take the first top, it's probably going to be above 500. The next one, maybe around there, okay? But you have to keep in mind that this is just what's in the pool right now. There could be a lot more people in the pool, you know, by July, okay? So essentially what you're looking at is, you know, who's in the pool, how many people are in, you know, how does your score compare to other people who are there? That being said, I don't want to discourage you guys, even if your, you know, number is, you know, a little bit lower, okay? Prior to COVID, the government draws were pretty steady at the 470s. Sometimes it went a little bit to the 460s, high 460s or so, but it was around this range. And you can see that, you know, there are, I think above 450, there's around 50,000 in there. And so that's who's in the pool right now. So keep in mind, that's how these scores work. You never know. This is, it doesn't differentiate either between different kinds of categories. It doesn't differentiate between federal skilled worker category or Canadian experience class category. So that last year, when the government was only focused on the Canadian experience class category, then the numbers dropped to 300s because a lot of these numbers are actually people who have the foreign skilled worker. Will the government be doing all the draws for everybody every time? I don't know. We don't know. We shall see. Okay. But, you know, one thing, another client, I love my clients. My clients are so wise. They give me this great analogy. I had a client who I didn't think that her scores were that high. I said, you probably won't get drawn. She said, you know what, Elizabeth, my mom told me that you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a lottery ticket. So put me in the pool. And I said, all right, I put you in the pool. And, you know, 2 weeks later, the government had an announcement, invited people, and she was, you know, she got invited. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't win the lottery if you don't buy the lottery ticket. Last year, you know, the government went a little nuts, invited everybody who was under the CEC. The lowest score was 40, you know? So here's the thing, buy that lottery ticket, but especially if your points are a little bit lower, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm just going analogy. I'm just going metaphor after metaphor. I'm on a roll.
You're on a roll with your analogies, yeah.
It's all farm analogy, eggs and cream and all that. Don't put all your eggs in that one basket. You should have a plan B and a plan C. Okay. All right. Is this me?
Okay.
Or no?
So provincial nominees. Like we talked about when we were looking at the CRS points, With express entry, there are points that you can get if you have a nomination. Now, what is a provincial nomination? Well, basically, immigration and the granting of permanent residence is federal jurisdiction. What that means is it's that IRCC who's only able to grant the permanent residence. With that being said, what they've done is they've allowed provinces to create programs to help facilitate permanent residence. So they basically said, okay, provinces, we know that you all have different needs, different goals. So you create programs to help facilitate permanent residence in your provinces. Look at what you need and create programs for yourselves. So what that has meant is that every province is a little different in terms of the programs, the processes, eligibility, who can qualify, who can't. Every province is a little different. But what you can think about, the easiest distinction you can think about is that provinces have programs that are express entry linked and those that are outside of express entry. And this is a very, very important distinction, because if the program is with express entry, it's linked to express entry, that means that once you are nominated, you will get an additional 600 points in your express entry profile. If it is a non-express entry profile, when you get that nomination, you can't then decide, okay, I want to get the 600 points, because that nomination will not give you the additional 600 points. That's a non-express entry program, which means that you have to apply for permanent residence separately, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. So every province, like I said, very different in terms of the programs, the streams, the processes. In some of the provinces, when we're talking about the express entry streams, in some of the provinces, you have to apply directly to the province. So the first step is creating a profile or submitting an application directly to that province. Other provinces, like Ontario, are a little different. Ontario doesn't want you to apply to them first, okay? Ontario says, we will find you, don't worry, okay? And so the way that Ontario does their express entry, and I'm speaking only specifically about the express entry programs right now, is they go into the federal express entry pool. They distill it down to a smaller group of people based on who meets Ontario's requirements. And then from that smaller group, they send out letters, what they're called notifications of interest. Once you have that notification of interest, it's at that point that you can then prepare and submit an application to Ontario for one of the express entry streams. Okay, so very important. You can't approach Ontario first. Ontario has to send you the notification of interest. Once you have that notification of interest, then you can prepare and apply to the province for one of the express entry streams. Now, Ontario has 3 streams for this that are express entry linked. The first is called the Human Capital Priority Stream. In this program, with this Human Capital Priority Stream, what Ontario has been doing is that they have been distinguishing occupations and doing draws based on applicants' occupation, so where you have work experience in. So when we go back to our example, there's the large pool, they have their smaller pool of people. Even further, they distill that down by looking at the occupation that you have work experience in. And if your work experience is in one of the occupations that they're targeting, then you will receive, then you have the opportunity to receive a notification of interest. The second stream that Ontario has is the French-speaking skilled workers. For this, we're looking at having proficiency in both French and English, so you do have to have both your language tests. And then the last one is the trades-based occupations. Here, you have to have at least a year of work experience in one of Ontario's listed trades. So there's specific occupations that qualify for this stream. You do have to have at least a year of legal work experience in Ontario in order to qualify for this program. Now, with all 3 of these, okay, with all 3 of Ontario's programs, when Ontario does a draw, they announce it on their website. They say, okay, this is what we've, this is how many people we've sent out notifications of interest to. And they also announce the CRS scores that they look at. So CRS kind of creeps back up into the Ontario programs as well, because Ontario is looking at your points in the express entry pool when they're deciding who to send out invitations to.
Okay, so for some of you who may have received your master's or PhD streams in the last 2 years of graduation, you may be interested in applying under these streams as well. So in Ontario, if you graduated from master's or PhD and you apply within 2 years of you guys receiving your degree, then you're fine. The nice thing about this stream is you don't look at job offers. You're fine without a job offer. You can still qualify, but you shouldn't be looking to do another program while you're waiting for your permanent residence. Let's say you finish your master's and you want to do a PhD right away, then they're not going to want to give you the nomination. You should be ready to like enter the labor market. And we're going to talk about essentially the EOI system. So this application is not express entry linked. Okay, you have to apply for it directly, and you get permanent residence based purely on the provincial nomination. It has nothing to do with express entry. However, the caveat is the Ontario now has a pool just like express entry where you can't just apply directly, just say, I want to apply for master's and just apply. You put yourself as a candidate and then you have to get an invitation to apply. And we'll talk about the system and the points that go along with it later on.
Yeah, so another set of streams that are also not express entry based are the employer-based streams. So in Ontario, there are 3 streams that qualify under the employer-based programs. Now, we'll talk about the streams and the particular criteria for them in a moment, but when we're talking about any of these employer-based programs, it's important to think about the requirements on the company, there's requirements on the position that's being offered, and there's requirements on the applicant. So let's first look at the employer requirements, so the company that's providing you the full-time job offer. The company has to be in operation in Ontario for at least 3 years before you can apply through one of these streams. In addition to that, there are requirements on their income, their revenue, and on the number of full-time Canadians or permanent resident employees that they have at the time of your application. Now, those specific numbers do change based on where the company is located. So if they're inside of the Greater Toronto Area, they need to have grossed at least $1 million in the past fiscal year, and they need to have at least 5 full-time employees that are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. If the employer is outside of the Greater Toronto Area, that number decreases. They need to have grossed at least $500,000 in the past fiscal year and currently have at least 3 full-time employees that are Canadians or permanent residents. Like I said, the job offer that you're being provided with does have to be full-time and it has to be permanent. When we say permanent, what we mean by that is that there is no end date. It's an indeterminate contract. Now, there's 3 streams to this. The first is the international student stream. Here, you need to have a job offer that's for a high-skilled position, and the wage that the company is offering you has to meet entry-level wage. So when we're talking about wages, IRCC has basically set what's called the entry and the prevailing wage. For the international student stream, you have to meet the entry, which is the lower level. Now, with the international student stream, you have to have, one of the big requirements for this program is that you have to apply within 2 years of graduation from a program that qualifies. So when we talk about programs that qualify, either you've completed a program that's 2 years or longer here in Ontario, or you've done a 1-year postgraduate program, which requires, in terms of eligibility for that program of study, it needs to say that you required a degree in order to be admitted into that program. If the program requirements are a degree or work experience or a degree or diploma, that 1-year program will not be eligible for the international student stream. A big advantage of going through the international student stream is that there's no work experience requirements. Okay, so as soon as you finish studying here, you'd be able to go through and apply through the international student stream, assuming you do have a job offer at that time. The second program is the skilled worker. Here, you do need to have, again, a high skilled job offer. Wage is a bit higher. You have to meet the median or the prevailing level wage. With this program, biggest criteria is that you have to have at least 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years, and that work experience has to be in the same occupation as your job offer. Okay, so it's very important that we're looking at the same specific occupation, the same NOC code as the position that's being offered to you and that you're using as part of this program. The last program that falls under the employer-based streams is the in-demand occupations. Here, Ontario has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. And very importantly, this is where we see the only stream where you can use low-skilled work experience. Okay, so the in-demand list is all low-skilled positions. Okay, so your job offer has to be in an occupation that's part of this list, and you need to have at least 9 months of experience in Ontario in the same occupation as your job offer. The work experience doesn't necessarily have to be with the same employer, but you do have to have at least 9 months before you can qualify and apply for this program.
Okay, let's talk about the selection points for the OINP. All right. So first of all, yay, hooray for us older people. Age does not count. It doesn't matter how old you are, it does not count. Now, one thing you have to understand that not all of these points matter for every single category. Some of these factors matter for some people and they don't matter for others. So for example, a job offer. It has no bearing on people who are applying under the master's or PhD stream. It only applies to those under the employer-based stream. Canadian work experience, you get some points based for everybody. You'll get some points if you have Canadian work experience. Education, this is only for people who are applying under master's, PhD, and the international student stream. Doesn't matter for the foreign worker or in-demand streams. Language, again, only for those people who are applying under the student stream. So if you're applying under the foreign skilled worker or in-demand, you don't have to, like foreign skilled worker, you don't even have to do a language exam. It doesn't matter, okay? Location of the job offer, that's only for the employer-based. It's not for people under the master's or PhD stream. Location of study for students. When I say location, you'll get more points if your location is outside of the GTA than if it's in the GTA. And then strategic priorities. This is where the government would announce, okay, we want people only who have worked in these occupations. They've done that for a few of the draws in the last draw. So, you know, we'll see if they continue to do that. Zia, what do you think? What are your thoughts about some of, you know, how they've been doing draws or how they might do draws for the OINP?
Well, I think right now, of course, the provincial programs have been affected as well, right? Because there's no express entry draws happening, and there hasn't been anything since October last year. You know, we're seeing that the points for the minimum scores for these EOI-based programs have increased a little bit if we compare it to last year. So right now they're a bit higher. I'm hoping that they go down a bit once we start seeing express entry draws, because then we're removing the need to be applying for permanent residence through the provincial program. So hopefully, as IRCC continues to do express entry draws, and as the express entry draws scores go lower, we'll start seeing a decrease as well in the OINP scores that are required.
Yeah, and also these strategic priorities, they just started having these in the last few draws, probably because right now there's a lot of people in the pool and they think that they can be picky. But hopefully they'll stop doing that because they're missing out on a lot of people who have really important jobs who aren't being selected for this. By the way, you guys can apply for both programs. If you don't need to, don't do it. But if you wanted to hedge your bets, then you can absolutely apply for the OIMP and put yourself in the express entry. If they select you, you can also apply for express entry as well. Okay, so just wanted to run through some other possibilities quickly for other kinds of PR. Spousal sponsorship. Some of you may have relationships with Canadians or permanent residents. A spouse in immigration terms is not just someone who you're married to. It also includes common law relationships. The definition of a common law relationship is someone who you have lived with for only 1 year. Okay, so 1 year you've lived with that person, they can sponsor you. Of course, it's a conjugal relationship, not like roommates or whatever. But you know, if they're Canadian or permanent residents, they may be able to sponsor you. And right now, given the uncertainties in the system, that might be the way to go for some of you. Okay. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention to you is even if they're not sponsoring you, even if you don't really need them, or you know, but if you are in a common law relationship, you have to declare it in your forms. Okay, very, very important that you mark that 1 year anniversary of living together, if not for anything else, but for immigration's sake as well. Okay. The other categories, you know, we work with artists and athletes. If you have been able to be self-employed and, you know, where you have been able to survive on your art or on your sport for the last 2 years, and you can show that you would be able to be self-sustaining in Canada as well, then this might be the class for you. It used to be very fast. Within 1 year, we would get a decision. Now I think it's stretched to 2-3 years for this category. Startup visa class is something that I do a lot of work with. And these are for people who want to found a innovative company in Canada. And if you want, and then if you get the support of an incubator or an angel investor group, then you can apply for permanent residence, and you can also get a work permit to do so as well. So if you're interested in that, do let me know. It's not as simple as that. There are a lot of nuances. You have to show that you can and will be managing your business, that your business, you know, will be running in Canada. But if this is what you want to do, this might be the right category for you. I put in here Hong Kong PR. So if you've you know, finished, there's a stream A and stream B. If you're a Hong Kong resident and you recently graduated, if stream A is for people who have graduated from a program in Canada, stream B is for people who have graduated outside of Canada and have had 1 year of work experience in Canada. But this is only for those lucky Hong Kong residents as well. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We've talked a lot about different programs. What should you keep in mind? What should you be doing right now?
Yeah, so very importantly, I mean, everything that we've talked about today, it's just it's the tip of the iceberg, right? It's very high level. You want to make sure that you have a plan that's specific to you. So it's really important, sit down, you know, schedule a consultation, sit down with an immigration lawyer who can go through your specific background, your circumstances, and is able to put together a plan for you as to how you can get your permanent residence, how you can meet your immigration goals.
Second thing is, like I said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You see what the system is doing, right? You know, if I was trying to figure out what was going to happen, I would never have thought they would have filled up their inventory, you know, like 2 months before the year even started, and there was all this backlog back in September, August of last year, when they were inviting people from like 300s in Express Entry. But we always advise plan for the hope for the best and plan for the worst, right? And so you do have to have a plan here, plan there. You don't have to apply for everything, but at least have something in the back of your mind.
And then obviously know what you need to do to get there, right? So know what the steps are in terms of getting to your goal of permanent residence. And that can include maintaining your status while you're here, right? While you're in Canada, you don't want to lose your status. You want to make sure that you're keeping your status throughout your whole stay. And then other parts of your application, have those ready as at the earliest you can in terms of getting the French test, studying for it, having those French tests done so that you have them ready. You know, we never know when things are going to change with immigration, when new programs are going to be announced. Last year, the TR to PR program was announced in mid-April, and opened up in May. And so really it was anyone who had their language tests already done were able to apply through the program. But if you didn't have them, you weren't, the tests were just too full to be able to actually schedule. So really important to know what you want to do, what your goal is, and to be working towards that early.
And the final one, you know, I was thinking, I don't want to put this in here because it sounds like I'm like advertising for people to hire me, but I thought I'd put this in there because it really is true. There are a lot of people out there in the immigration world who tell you, oh yeah, hire me and I can help you. But for me, I firmly believe that you have to hire a lawyer, not a consultant. A lawyer has the legal background to help you along the way. We are governed by the Law Society, and therefore there is a lot less fraud, a lot more knowledge, etc. You also should find someone who is experienced in immigration law. So you guys, you know, what we've told you is the tip of the iceberg, but if you go to someone and they don't even know what you're talking about, even if they are a lawyer, there are lawyers out there who may just dabble in immigration law and they're not really experts in there, then be very wary of that, because if they don't really know this, then their immigration law is very, very complex. And if they don't know everything, then there could be a lot of major mistakes that can happen. But in the end, you know, if you are going to go through these precarious times and go through the system just by trying to muddle through it yourself, looking at different websites and trying to figure things out, it's like, I'm going to do one more analogy that a client told me. It's like you're trying to go through a dynamite factory with a lit match. You may be able to get through it, but it's still not smart. Okay. So anyway, let's go through some questions. Here's our contact information. You can sign up to our web newsletter if you're not on there. If you want to schedule a personal consultation, do let us know that you've gone through our webinar, and we will give you the discounted rate for the webinar as well. Our discounted rate is $100 to come for a consultation. Okay. All right. Shall we go through some questions?
Yes. Okay. So I have lots ready. The first one, Elizabeth, even though I've applied for a TR to PR program, can I apply for Express Entry, or is it going to jeopardize my existing application?
I would say you can apply for both applications. The only thing that you should be aware of is know what you submitted for the TR to PR. If it contradicts what it is for Express Entry, you know, there may be an issue there. So, but you can certainly apply for both. Okay, Zia, does the 18-month extension apply to all postgrad work permits, or different time extensions to different lengths of postgrad work permits?
It's a great question. So again, right now we're still waiting for full instructions, for full details on the programs. But if we compare it to the program that IRCC had last year in terms of extending postgrad work permits, it didn't matter what length of time your initial postgrad work permit was for, you were able to get the full duration, that extension that IRCC was offering. So if they do that same thing, then it should not matter what your initial postgrad work permit length is, you should be able to qualify for the full 18. But again, that's the opinion right now. Right now, we're still waiting for IRCC to actually release information on the program. Related to that, so Elizabeth, I know that the postgrad work permit is usually supposed to be a one-time opportunity. So this 18 months that we're talking about, is it extra time in addition to the one-time postgrad work permit?
Yes, it's a very special policy to help people deal with the craziness that's going on. So normally it's a one-time, once in a lifetime thing. This is the very special policy to allow you guys, if your work permits happen to expire this year, to extend it for another 18 months. Will this extension have a cost?
We'd expect that it will probably have the same application fees as the regular postgrad work permit. Again, full details are still to be announced, so stay tuned. Like Elizabeth said earlier, we will send out a newsletter once IRCC has released full information on this program. Elizabeth, for CRS points, when we're talking about siblings, can we use parents or in-laws to qualify for those additional points as well?
No, just brothers, sisters, not even people you consider bros or like real brothers and sisters who are Canadians or permanent residents. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible among the draws that there will be a CEC specific draw?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're still waiting for full details on the program, but it is potentially possible that they go back to doing some sort of program specific draws as well, or alternate between general and program specific. We have to wait to see what IRCC decides to do. Okay, the next question here, Elizabeth, for OIMP master stream, considering many of us did part of our degrees from our home countries, does the 1 year, so is the requirement of being physically present in Ontario for at least a year still applicable?
Yeah, I think it is. I haven't heard of any changes. Have you heard of it?
Yeah. No, OIMP has not made any amendments or any concessions for that. I mean, part of the actual regulations for Ontario's nominee program is that physical presence requirement. So unfortunately, it will mean having to wait until you get the 12 months before you can go through the program.
Zia, this person wants to know if they work remotely, they live in Ontario, but they work remotely for a person in BC, can they still apply for the master's stream?
Well, you have to have an intent to live and work in Ontario. So if you're working outside of the province, and I know this is a newer question that's being posed to Ontario, because the reality is that, yeah, a lot of companies now are doing remote work. And so that question of, does it just matter if you're where you're physically present, where your employer's present, especially where a job offer is not part of the program. But as of right now, I would say you probably need to be working and living in the province.
This is
I don't know, Elizabeth, do you have any?
This is to be determined, and Zia actually is part of the Ontario Bar Association OIMP committee. Maybe we can ask that question next time to OIMP and see what they say about that, eh? Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
Okay, Elizabeth, the next one here. Do you expect for TR to PR to come back?
I would say no. The reason why we are in this mess is because of the TR to PR, I think. So unless they are gluttons for punishment, probably not the same TR to PR. That's being said, I'm not ruling out there are other categories that could come out. Certainly, I think they are certainly looking for that, but the same TR to PR, I would venture to guess highly doubtful. Okay. For the OIMP student stream, international student stream, does a student who graduates and has a job offer, can they apply immediately or do they have to work for a specific duration?
With the international student stream, there is no work experience requirement. So as soon as you finish your program, as soon as you have that job offer, you actually can apply immediately. You can go into the pool and create that profile immediately. So one of the benefits of this particular program is that there is no work experience requirement.
So Zia, we are at the 5:10 mark. So we're over the mark. Why don't we do one last question each, and then we will call it a day. All right. Let's see here. Can an undocumented worker apply towards the spousal sponsor with the spousal sponsorship?
For spousal sponsorship, it is possible, but there's specific ways that you have to apply. I think if you are in that situation, contact us. We'll schedule a consultation appointment and we'll be able to walk you through that process. All right, final question of the evening. Let's find a good one here. Elizabeth, for CC, can you apply as soon as you have that 1 year? And when does that 1 year start if I'm an international student?
If you're an international student, the 1 year starts when you are not a full-time student and you are working legally. So by working legally, it means that you have the right to work. For those people who graduate, finish their program, you cannot work until you've applied for your postgrad work permit. And so once you've applied for the postgrad work permit, you can start counting the hours that you work from that point, even if you don't have your work permit in hand. Okay. And yes, after 1 year, you qualify for it. Yes, absolutely, you qualify for it. I've had some questions from people who want to see the link for arranging consultations. Do email us. You can call us as well. I prefer email myself, and we will certainly, reply to you and set up a time for a consultation. Okay, guys. Well, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the lovely day we have outside. Take care, everyone. And here's to getting through the system and getting through 2022. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.